autism and inclusion. So the reason why, one of the reasons why I thought this may be a good topic is because the theme for this year's Autism Awareness Month is inclusion in the workplace, how to manage in a post-pandemic era. But if we look at it statistically, world over, people with autism who are employed, who have a vocation, comes to only around 25%, of which in India the number is much less. So we have to start with inclusion from a much younger age. Topics that I would like to cover right now: one, what is inclusion? What exactly do we mean by inclusion? What are the barriers to inclusion? And also, how do we go about promoting inclusion in various settings, starting with family, then community, school, and vocational. But because we had a few questions on, or rather comments by people who wanted to know what autism is, my first 2-3 slides are on what autism is. Okay. So if you look at what is autism, it is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Okay, it is something that is there from birth, but can present at different times, different ages. Most of them usually present before the age of 3 years. Though for some children who have very mild features, they present when the social demands kind of exceed what the child's capabilities are. And it is characterized by two main difficulties, where the child has difficulty in social communication, which is communication in a social setting. So communication means that it should be purposeful, there should be an intent, there should be a wish to share things, and not just speech. So there is a basic difference between communication and speech. So speech is where you just make meaningful sounds from your mouth, where even like singing songs or telling rhymes or counting 1 to 10 or A to Z and all is considered speech, but only when it is used to convey a message will it become communication. So communication in a social setting is what is majorly a major challenge for children with autism. And the other thing is that they have these restricted repetitive patterns of behavior and interest. And this is what generally people think when they think of a child with autism, where they'll be flapping their hands or spinning themselves or spinning things and or gets upset by certain noises. So these two criteria should be there to call a child as having autism. And it is a spectrum. So if you've seen one child with autism, that is all that you have seen. You've seen one child with autism, because children with autism can vary tremendously in their social skills, in their communication skills, in their intelligence, in the difficulties that they face, in the sensory issues. So it is an entire vibrant spectrum of people that we see. And it is a heterogeneous condition, meaning that this autism, like you see in the second point, it is a behaviorally defined disorder. So you can have a lot of etiologies for it. Starting from maternal or rather mother taking medicines while she was pregnant, medicines like anti-epileptics, to conditions where you have a known genetic problem like Fragile X or Down syndrome, to some people have there is a gut dysbiosis theory that is coming in. There's a new immune theory that is coming. There are a lot of conditions that can cause the similar features of autism. So it is a very heterogeneous condition, which is why for each child we need to assess and plan for them individually. A group thing doesn't really work, or rather a group treatment, or rather like how we say for fever you take paracetamol. There is nothing that can be as standard or as across the board like that. And studies have shown that there is altered connectivity in the brain, which I'm not going into details now, but there are connections in certain areas of the brain that are very strong and other areas that are very weak. And so that explains why children behave the way they do. And finally, though these two are the major areas of problem, there is a spillover effects on other domains of development, which is why it earlier used to be called a pervasive developmental disorder, because it used to affect all areas of development. So it is not that though these children have an additional problem in social communication and with these behaviors and interests, the autism does spill over into attention, into learning issues, and into sleep issues. So there is a spillover that happens in other domains of development. So once more, I always do this in my sessions. What autism is not. Autism is not bad parenting. So please, parents, do not blame yourselves, nor other people blame parents for how the child is, because parenting has nothing to do with autism. It is not intellectual disability. More than 40% of children with autism actually have average to above average intelligence. Their difficulties are in communication and in sensory sensitivities, and also the certain patterns and interests. It is not willful disobedience or temper tantrums, and again, it is not caused by vaccines. There was a study that came out a long time back suggesting a link, but that study has been disproved multiple times over and was found to be fraudulent. So what are the challenges that children with autism face, and why is it that inclusion needs to be talked about? So various challenges, like I said, one is in social behavior. The social behavior aspect is what is mostly obvious in that children do not maintain eye contact, or they have difficulty with eye contact. They don't reciprocate. You talk to them, they don't respond back in the same way. They prefer looking somewhere else. Their body language is different. So when you actually talk to adults with autism, what they say is that it is not that they don't like mingling socially, but it's just that they don't know how to. They lack the ability to understand other people's gestures, or even if they do understand the gesture, understand the intent behind the gesture. So this is a challenging area for them, social behavior. The other challenge is communication. So even those who speak, now if we look at statistics, around 40 to 50% children with autism do not speak. But they can communicate. So there are other methods of communication using augmentative alternative communication devices, or using pictures, sign language. There are various methods of communication. But even those who can speak, we realize that the communication pattern is different. Again, because they are not able to judge whether the person sitting across from them is interested in what they have to say or not. So this is a challenge that children with autism face. Sensory sensitivities is something that is very, very common. So these children can be scared of crowds, or have issues with certain frequency of noises, have issues with the lighting in certain places. So this is sensory sensitivity is something that is seen in around 90% of children with autism. But again, that is also very person specific. Stimming behavior. Stimming behavior is what we call these repetitive movements like flapping, rocking, spinning, and all that they do to themselves. So stimming behavior, there are many reasons why they do stimming behavior. One is because it's a sensory issue. They are seeking for that input. The other is that it helps calm them down. Like how some of us, like when I am anxious, I tend to shake my leg a lot, or I tend to put my fingers like this a lot. Some people pluck their hair, some people bite their nails. So this stimming behavior is something that also helps relieve anxiety in them. The only problem is that because people who are neurotypical don't understand it, it looks threatening, it looks scary, and so then they keep away, and that again is the reason why inclusion is a challenge. Difficulty being flexible is also seen in some children with autism. Again, it is because they are anxious. Anxiety is one major reason why children have difficulty being flexible, or they want to stick to one same thing the same way, because that is very predictable for them. So this is a challenge, but all these are challenges that can be overcome and need to be overcome. And various other coexisting conditions, like you have gastrointestinal issues, you can have other health related issues when you have autism, like immune flare-ups and things like that. You can have children with significant sleep disorders, many challenging behaviors. So all these are also reasons why children with autism have a problem with inclusion. Now, what are the strengths? We don't always generally, the medical model of looking at things is we look at what a person doesn't have and try and correct it. But nowadays, the thinking is changing. We are trying to look more at strengths, more at the abilities that the child has, and work backwards so that the deficits can be managed and the strengths are strengthened. So if you look at what are the strengths that they have in the areas of interest, they are extremely focused. They will be able to do whatever it is in their area of interest very well. They are honest, because lying is not something that comes easily, it comes naturally to them. Even So they are honest people. Many of them do like repetitive work, again, because it is very predictable and they don't have to and the anxiety kind of gets under control when things become routine and repetitive. So things that generally we tend to find boring, they are interested in doing it. They like repetitive work. They are persistent. So if we tell them to do something till it is done, they tend to stick on to it. They offer a different perspective. They tend to see mostly patterns and mostly things that we don't think of. Like if you look at the example of um, famous adult with autism, Dr. Temple Grandin. She changed the entire animal husbandry system because she saw patterns that in the way animals behave that other people were just oblivious to. Okay. Also, people with autism are very good at picking up data patterns, are very good at picking up patterns of consumption of items and in the data, big data processing and things like that, because they tend to see patterns. This is again not true of all people with autism, but generally people with autism are very visual people, and so they can see it that way. They are visual learners and they tend to pay attention to details. And if an area of interest and skill is identified, usually they become a master at it. Okay. So now coming back to the topic, what exactly is inclusion? So inclusion is for all people, regardless of their abilities, disabilities, or healthcare needs. They have the right to be respected and appreciated as valuable members of their communities, to participate in recreational activities, okay, to work at jobs that pay a competitive wage, not a wage that is lesser because a person has autism, and to attend general education classes if they are able to. Okay, so this is what true inclusion actually means. And if we look at it, actually we lack in almost all of this. So inclusion is possible only if there is support, because definitely there are challenges that these people with autism face, and so they need support. So support is what's going to help them participate fully in the communities and can be of various forms, such as accommodations. So autism is not a visible handicap in the sense that like how a person is on a wheelchair. So, for a wheelchair, you need to build a ramp. But for a person with autism, it may be a sensory problem, like the bright lights in a place, or some light that is continuously buzzing because of some short circuit or some wiring problem that is there. So all these are things that can actually set off or rather upset a person with autism. So accommodations will consist of being flexible in things that they need to do, and also making sure that the environment is kind of suitable for them. Training teachers, prospective employers are also the way that we can offer support. And also while they are doing what they're doing, getting assistance from counselors and friends. So a support system is essential. And if you look at it, all of us do need a support system. How many of us after a bad day at work go home and either cry to a spouse or to a family or to a sister or friends or whatever? So there is a support system that all of us need. Only thing is that for people with autism, it needs to be a little bit more obvious that there's a support system in place. Now, let us look at the barriers that prevent inclusion. Okay, there are 4 types of barriers. There is a person-related, which is to the person with autism. There are family-related barriers. There are school-related barriers and community-related barriers. So person-related, I've already said it earlier, all the challenges that they have, which are the sensory sensitivities, the poor social skills, communication issues, and challenging behaviors. Family-related, the biggest barrier is the perception of stigma, in that the families feel that they are going to be looked down at. The parents, other people are going to keep commenting about their child, and it is going to hamper the other children. So these are all various family related perception of stigma that is there, which again prevents inclusion from happening. Then the other thought is that my child won't be able to do it. So even before we give the child an opportunity or give the child an attempt to try, we directly write it off saying, oh, this is too complicated, he will not be able to do it. So that is the other attitude related barrier that is there. Fear for child safety. This is now generally the world has become less safe than it used to be, even for children. So fear for the child safety is something that does keep parents from actively pursuing inclusion for their child. And also, again, like I said, they're worried about the siblings. So what will they think of the child's sibling if they see this child walking with her sibling, her sibling, and what is going to happen to the sibling's future? Will they get married? Will they be able to go out for work? So all these are other concerns that parents have, that again is a barrier for inclusion. School related is mostly because of lack of knowledge and because of the various misconceptions about about children with autism, thinking that they'll be violent and aggressive. And most situations, actually, they are not. And definitely there is a lack of training and awareness among the teachers about how to handle children with autism, and poor infrastructure, in the sense that you need to have when the child with autism is there in the class, there needs to be a place where child can go out when he or she is feeling overwhelmed. So that kind of a lack of infrastructure, and large classes. You have classes of 40 or 50 even in LKG, UKG, and that is definitely a school related barrier, because a child with autism cannot cope in such a big crowd. The syllabus is also quite complex, and the teaching style of many teachers, because if it's more of a didactic lecture like thing, like what I'm telling to you right now, it is unlikely to help the child with autism. Again, community related, again, there's a lot of lack knowledge and misconceptions. It's considered a rat race. Life is considered nowadays to be a rat race. So or a dog eat dog world. So people are hesitant to take that additional additional step to help people with autism become a part of the community. They are worried about whether things are going to be lost. Okay. Okay, I think I am really exceeding my time. I am sorry. Okay, perspectives and attitudes of the community also need to change. So for true inclusion, all barriers must be addressed. Now, what are the skills that are needed in children with autism, or children, adults, adolescents and adults with autism? There should be independence in ADL skills. That is necessary for them to be included. It is not the academic skills that are important, but it is skills, independence in ADL. Communication is another important skill that they need. It doesn't have to be speech again. There are other methods of communication. In fact, the reason why I put up this book, Moonlight, by Sharon Mary Zacharias, because she is a non-verbal teen with autism who writes beautiful poems, who writes beautiful stories about her condition and about the world in general. And her understanding is so profound that wouldn't have been possible if we thought that she is not speaking and so she doesn't have any thoughts to herself. So communication in any manner, be it speech, is what definitely all of us want, but it's a fact that not everyone is going to speak, but those who can't speak, get them in mode of communication. It is going to help with their behaviors. Okay, they need to develop and need to have exposure to non-academic skills, various non-academic skills, and various soft skills also need to be inculcated from childhood. The sense that personal hygiene and grooming is something that they need to become independent in. They need to learn to be punctual. They have to have good manners. They have to learn self-regulation. So all these are things that parents, and also advocacy and communication. So if they're going to be included in a setup, and they need, or rather they are uncomfortable with the situation, or they feel that something is disturbing them, they're going to have a meltdown, they should be able to tell that, to communicate that, rather than having a sensory meltdown and then again getting excluded out of things. So that is where advocacy and communication comes in. So all these are skills that have to be started or rather trained in the child, and training should start early. It should not be after the child has become a teenager or has become an adult. Okay, and we should always presume competence. What do I mean by always presume competence? Just because a child doesn't respond to you or doesn't look at you while you're speaking doesn't mean that the child is not hearing. A person with autism, when they look at your face, what happens is that they are going to be immersed in the details. Oh, this is out of place. Her hair is out of place. Her eye is out of her. One eye is bigger than the other. These are going to be the various other details that they're going to be immersed in. And so they may not pay attention to what you're saying. So children, when they realize that, they will look away. It is part of their difficulty in integrating their senses. So just because a child looks away doesn't mean that he or she does not understand you. So always presume competence. Start at a lower level, but presume that the child understands and can do what you want the child to do. So inclusion at home, there has to be equal opportunities for the child with autism to participate. They have to be made to be actively be involved in daily household activities. So from the age of 2 to 3 years itself, or even younger, children can be made to do household chores. You will have to, because they are visual learners, verbal instructions may not be very useful. Instead of telling them what to do, show them what needs to be done, hold their hand and make them do it. So involve in daily household activities. So that will include like things like putting clothes into the washing machine, taking clothes out from the washing machine, helping them to dry, water plants, helping washing the car. All these are very simple things that even 2 to 3-year-old children can start with. Okay. You have to start giving responsibilities to them when they're around 4 to 5 years of age itself, in the sense that this is their responsibility that they have to do, and with appropriate reward. So that is a way of getting them again independent and included at home. If they do something wrong, you need to allow them to face the consequences of their actions. That does not always mean beating. Somehow, whenever I talk about consequences to parents, they always think it is a physical punishment. But no, if it can be punishments in the time, in the sense that they don't go out for that day to play, or they don't get to see their favorite TV show, something. But if they have done something wrong, they have to face consequences of their actions. And one thing that many adults with autism say is that the old style parenting is what helps them. Now, if you look at what parenting was in the 50s and 60s, things were very strict, in the sense that you had to be on time for dinner. There was a particular time when you had to wake up. There was a particular time when you had to go to sleep. There were certain rules and things that were expected of you to do that you just had to do without bargaining or without complaining about it. So the thing with the children with autism is that they like boundaries. If they are lost if you don't tell them what they are expected to do. So the old style of parenting in that way, being a little strict, maybe not entirely like a military parent, but still being relatively strict with them in the sense of timing, acceptable behavior. They cannot, if they throw a tantrum at the dinner table, they go hungry. So those kind of things, it may sound a little cruel in this age, but these are things that actually give stability to people with autism so that they can develop further. So the old style parenting. Definitely, they need opportunities to explore nature. Being inside 4 walls in a house, especially now in the COVID time, has become really dreadful or difficult for children with autism. So they need opportunities to explore nature, opportunities to have fun. It is not just from one therapy to another therapy that they need to go, but they need to have fun, go out on trips with their parents, get together as small parties at home. Opportunities to listen to and participate in conversations. Again, what happens is that because we assume that they do not understand, that they do not respond, we talk to even adolescents or adults with autism as if they are children. So we talk to them in that kind of thing, and anything major and all, we keep them apart and the other members of the family discuss it. This is not how it should be. Children with autism do understand, or adults with autism do understand. And the more they hear language, the more they are going to be able to form and understand language and start communicating. So they need opportunities to listen to and participate in communication. There has to be interaction with the extended family also. Only then will it be true inclusion. So when the extended family gets together, and when there is like singing, dancing, and all these kind of things, also actively get the child involved in it. Okay, so this is how we start off with inclusion in the family. Now, when you look at, again, the ICF is International Classification of Function and Abilities. So generally what we as professionals and as therapists, when we see a child with autism, what we look at first is the body structure and function. We try and see what is the child lacking in. And we work on that, hoping that that is going to improve the child's activity or what the child can do, and that way participate in the community. But this is where children with autism have a problem, in that even though they may have the skill, they are not and may do the activity solitarily. When it comes to participation, it becomes a whole different ball game for them. This is why we see children who know words, like in the speech therapist place, they may look at a glass of water and say, or the picture of a glass of water and say water, or picture of a food and say food. But in real life, they are not able to participate. They're not able to use that word. So that is where a big problem is for children with autism. So what is recommended nowadays is to work backwards. Start from participation and then you work backwards. So you have participation where you kind of set a goal, like the child, the child can sing. And you decide that, okay, this function is coming up, child needs to be able to sing. So because she loves singing. So then you work backwards. So since you want the child to sing, the child should be able to stand still, pay attention, or not go flapping and all that at that time. So that kind of sensory activities are done so that the child is able to self-regulate. And also you work on the oromotor functions of speech and all that. So working backwards is something that really helps actually to promote interaction. Okay. So again, participation, inclusion in the local community, you have to have a goal of participation in the community activities, and that should be the focus. And then we work backwards to attain the skill that is necessary. And yes, the other concern that parents have is that they feel sad when they see everyone else staring. But remember that people who stare are people who are curious to find out what exactly is happening. Sure, there will be some of them who are out to just generally gossip and talk ill about you. But most of them, they are just curious. They want to know what is happening. So when you see people staring, educate them. There was a one when we had visited CADE in Trivandrum. It is a school for children with autism. The director there had given us few cards, like visiting cards, that just said, my child has autism. So many 1 in 54 children have autism. These are the features of autism. He is not behaving bad. We need your acceptance and inclusion. So it was just a small card that was just handed out to anyone and everyone who stared at them. And that is one way of, again, educating the community, because the reason is a lot of misconceptions and lack of knowledge is one of the reasons why inclusion doesn't happen. And always start small. So what do I mean by start small? Is that if, for example, you want, again, the child to be able to play, the child loves playing football, and you want the child to be able to play football with the group of boys that are there in your flat apartment complex or in the neighborhood. Start off with playing football with the child at home, so that the child kind of knows the rules and understands what is expected. Then get 2 or 3 children to come and they start playing with them, so that again that little bit of anxiety that the child has on seeing new people and all is lesser. And then slowly we will work towards the football coaching and things like that. So always you start small, but you have to start in the community, with the community. Again, like I said, work backwards. So if a child wants to or likes football but doesn't have the coordination, you start with the aim of planning to make him play football and then work backwards to work on the coordination. I hope that is clear. Now, coming to inclusion in schools, schools are very important because it's not just academic education, but it is very important for development of social skills. So particularly children with autism, once there are different stages of play. So you have a cause and effect play, which is where they will keep pressing the same switch over and over again and keep looking at the fan to see whether it is on or off. So that is where we say cause and effect association has come. Then you have an imitation, where they start imitating what parents and other people in the family do. So children who have attained imitation skills, sending them to a regular school is the best way to help them improve on their social skills, because they will observe and learn from other children. And whenever we are planning on sending children to school, parents need to be upfront with teachers. There is no point in hiding the fact that your child has an issue or has needs that require support, because the more upfront you are about it, the more accepting teachers are going to be, and the more there is going to be a good partnership between you and the teachers. And again, regular school is what we always recommend, until and unless the child has significant intellectual disability, where then we send them to a special school to learn the necessary skills initially, but later transition on to a Normal school. Again, it may be at a lower grade than what the age is, but that is okay, because regular school with interaction with regular people is definitely needed. And there has to be added support or accommodations. Now, why should we include children with autism in our schools? This is one question that gets asked, in the sense that I know teachers have been asked this. Why is this child in my child's school? What is the benefit? He is just taking away attention from our child. So this is where I want a little bit of interaction, if we have time. Can at least 1 or 2 points can someone say as to why is it that we have to include children with autism in our schools? Narubi, please tell me, what do you think is the answer?
Yes, ma'am. First of all, ma'am, I want to say your presentation was very nice and informative, and I am enjoying your lecture, ma'am. So the answer of this question, ma'am, because, ma'am, if the special children will be included in the normal schools or in the mainstream schools, then they will see the normal children and they try to behave they try to behave like a normal children. But if continuously they are sitting in a special schools or with the special children, then they will learn their activity. They will learn the same activities that like the special children are doing. So in their behavior, in the special children, no behavior change will come. So, and their performance, their behavior, their activities will be going down and down, just because the atmosphere in which they are living, it not so much good, that would be helpful in improving their performance or behavior. It might be one of the reason that I think.
Very good, Tarubi. So we can obviously see that it benefits the child who has autism. Are there any other benefits?
We have one more comment, ma'am, in the chat box from Ms. Sivasri Ramachandran. She says that the child will learn from normal children. Mr. Sujit Patak has also said in the chat box, this will increase involvement of child with other child, also increase social involvement.
Oh, so these are the two comments. Again, we are looking as parents of children with autism, but think from the other aspect.
Actually, if I understand the question carefully from the ma'am, it is the question other way around, right? Like what not with the kids with autism, it is with the kids normal kids, the parents to the normal kids, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think it benefits them?
Yeah, I guess for their benefits are like, their children get more mature than the parents what they are.
Yeah,
they love to that, like, because as a child I grown up with a very positive environment, very loving, very normal, very caring. So I we never had a chance to come across with the kind of a mentally developmental way, because suddenly once we get the kind of issues we are into, like, we don't understand it. For understanding it took years for us. So definitely it's definitely going to help the normal children's, because they become more patient by handling these kids, and they become more mature than their parents, and they become it's going to be a very socially understanding community.
Yes. So Paravi is absolutely right, in the sense that, see, when you have a child with needs in the classroom, again, it depends a lot on the teacher's attitude. But it's a very good atmosphere to teach other children to be patient, to be tolerant, about diversity, about being accommodating to other people's needs, to be kind. Because these are all skills that unfortunately we are not getting taught in any other manner. Because right now, families are smaller. There's only 1 or 2 children. Even those who have 2 children, also children don't share toys with each other. There is a lot of, and especially with the onset of personalized gadgets like iPhones and things like that. Again, it is all me, and me. Thinking of another person is something that doesn't come naturally. It is something that needs to be inculcated. Definitely, there are a few children who are more prone, and for whom, when they get the right atmosphere, they do change. But empathy is something that can be very easily taught. And that is one of the biggest benefits of having a child with special needs in the classroom. And this is something that I want all teachers to understand, and to tell parents when other parents ask, what is it, my child is losing attention because of the other child. Sure, in a classroom of 50, anyway, your child is not going to get much attention. But the other skills, the skills that make a human, the humanity part of it is what comes to having these children. And finally, this translates to benefits to society, where we have more environmentally conscious, more socially conscious citizens who are not swayed by narrow-minded or narrow thinking. Okay. So
Ma'am, I
again,
would like
this
to,
is something.
I'd
Yeah.
like to just add on to, we had 2 more comments in the chat box. One was
Sure.
from Redmi, the name has not been changed. They said that it can increase awareness within school children and also acceptance would improve. And
Yes, very
Ms.
true.
Smita Kulkarni has also said that neurotypically normal children will start including them and they will
Yes.
learn to accept the autistic child into society. So I think this adds
Yes.
on to what you had said.
Yes, definitely. Acceptance is something that is very, very, very important. So this is one quote that I really like, that the biggest risk of not including a child with disabilities is that we limit everyone's potential as human beings. So this is again the very, very strong point for inclusion. Now, things to look out in schools for parents when you're planning to put your child in a school is there should be small classes. Generally suggest a Montessori-based schooling initially because it is more play-based, the focus is more on interaction, and extracurricular activities should be a must. It is not just academics that need to be focused on. And the schools themselves should be motivated. You should have motivated teachers. There is no point in wasting our time and energy trying to change the outlook of people who are rigid and decided that they are not going to change. Rather than that is to look at newer schools that are opening up, smaller schools that are opening up, where they are more flexible and more willing to take a chance. Role of parents is not just putting the child in school, they have to liaise regularly with the teachers. And one thing that I found very useful is that get in touch with the teacher, find out what the teacher is going to teach the next week, and over the weekend start teaching it to your child at home, so that the child also feels a sense of competence when he or she starts going to school, that she's able to catch up or rather is as par with the others. So a little more homework parents will have to do. And also get to know the other children and the parents in school in your busy schedule also, and create opportunities for friendship. So find out 2 or 3 people's names, invite them home. Obviously not in this corona time, the peak of corona season, but generally this also will pass. So after this is the strategies or the roles that you have to do when children start going to school. Now, strategies for teachers. Teachers have a very big role to play. And especially if you know that there is a child with autism who's coming to your class, get to know details about the child before joining. If possible, talk to the child, form a bond with the child, sensitize the class before the child joins. This is also very important, because giving them a perspective in the sense that, yes, we have a child who is coming in, this child doesn't talk, but she is otherwise very is good in drawing or good in doing this and that. I need you to work together. Let us decide to help him. Motivating the class to join together rather than bullying is something that can be done before the child joins. Keep the child generally in front of the class so that you can have a better rapport, and that the child always knows that you are around. Again, this gives the child stability, prevents anxiety. Buddy system is something that really works. So one of the teachers that I know used this remarkable technique, in the sense that what she used to do is whoever did the best in the class that week would sit next to a child with autism and help that child out. So it was a position of privilege. Everyone was striving to get that position to be able to help this child with autism. So that was a really wonderful strategy that teacher did. And in the end, finally, this is one thing that actually helped this child integrate very well in the school. And again, point system. Give responsibilities. Again, like how I said at home, to start household chores and things like that. Give responsibilities to the child in school. It can be as simple as wiping the board, or even collecting papers, or carrying maybe the teacher's books with her till the staff room. Some responsibility again, so that this child feels included and part of the school system then. And teachers have to be innovative. They have to be more hands-on. Instead of teaching by only using the smart TV or the chalkboard, or sorry, the blackboard and chalk, you use things like planting seeds to see how it grows, or even going on a field trip and seeing the different kind of things. So there has to be a lot of innovativeness coming in. So this is where actually a teacher can shine and change the lives of many. Always remember, you need to build a connection and you need to meet your learner with autism at the level that they are. And always think of what is it that the child can do. Again, focus on strengths, not on the challenges. Challenges are there, but think from what can the child do? How can I make this child a part of my class? Okay, few more strategies that I recently learned of. One is accommodations, not concessions. So what this means is that now, for example, there is a classroom where you have a child, or you have a child with autism, and you're putting a test. So the test, there are some 10 questions, of which the child can answer, or has the attention span only to answer 5 questions. So a concession will be like you give the test for 10 questions to everyone, and this child has to answer only 5. That is where a concession comes. Accommodation is where you change the system so that rather than having only 5 questions, or 10 and 5, you have 5 questions 2 times a week, because this child has the attention span of only being able to do 5 questions at one go. So when you split it up, what happens is that the child does the same amount of work, but in a setting that is favorable for the child, and it is also favorable for the other students also, because those 5 questions those children should have learned very well, and it is a smaller portion that is spread over 2 days. So this is what is meant by accommodations, and this is something new that I learned recently. And again, so whenever we think of accommodations, it is about redesigning the curriculum or the assessment of what the child has learned to benefit the entire class. This is where true inclusion is. Inclusion is not taking the child in and then every second period sending them off to a resource room or to a special room where the child again sits with herself and does something. That helps for socialization, in the sense the child is there in the social setting in school, but not real inclusion. Real inclusion is when the whole thing is modified in such a way that it benefits both of them, the child with needs and the child without needs. So this is very well explained by Dr. Stephen Shaw. I had attended a talk recently by him, and this is where my thinking actually kind of changed a lot. And this is a book that has been written by him, where the dummies are us who don't know much about autism. So he himself is a man with autism, and he is now an educator who is promoting inclusive education, training teachers and all as to how to do inclusive education. And teachers who are really interested in inclusion, I would suggest that you access his resources and learn from it. Now, when you come to vocational inclusion, again, for the person, there are a few things that we need to do. We need to focus on pre-vocational skills from childhood. So what do I mean by pre-vocational skills? Again, that is all the things that I said earlier about being on time, about personal hygiene, and we need to identify the talents and abilities and work on them, and give them opportunities to work from a young age. So this is where actually the village setup is quite nice that way, in the sense that these children from a very young age actually are made to take the cow for grazing, or to feed the chickens, or to help with the tractor and ploughing and all that and all. Or even the other things, what you can do is, if the child you see is interested in mechanics, become friends with the local mechanic and take him there, let him see the workshop, let him maybe help tighten a few screws or something. If your child, another thing what you can try is distributing newspapers in the morning. So you go with the child, and there will definitely be another newspaper distributor who's doing it routinely. Just pair up with him and let the child put it. So all these are again skills that we are teaching the child and giving them opportunities to learn practical working skills from a young age. This is the norm actually abroad, where you see children who mow other people's lawns, who again distribute papers, or do shovel the driveway in snow and things like that for pocket money. So this is considered a part of good training actually, but somehow in our country it is not. I am very sorry. Is the noise bothering you? There's a little bit of construction happening. So those are the opportunities that we need to look at. Okay, so again, the strengths in individuals with autism, I've already gone through this, and these are what is going to make them a powerhouse for the employer. Now, potential employers, what are the things that you can look at? Give tasks or work according to this person's area of interests, and you need to give clear directions, because again, people with autism have difficulty. If you just give them a vague instruction, then they do not know how to go about it, how to regulate it. But if you give them very clear stepwise instructions as to what needs to be done, you can be 100% sure it is going to be followed that way. Use again visual charts and instructions. This is beneficial even for those who are not autistic, because many times we forget all the various things that we hear. So visual charts are something that is very useful. Okay, and again, like I said, depending on the sensory sensitivities, there has to be an option for the people with autism to be flexible, or rather to the work to be a little flexible. So if the person is having a bad day, or is having either a body issue or even a sensory hypersensitivity issue, then they can take a break and come back and work at a later time when the office is not very crowded. Or so these are things that a little bit of flexibility needs to come in, that the employers have to actively do. And definitely, again, like in the school setting, you need to sensitize the employees, and always presume competence. So assume that a person can do. Again, start at a lower level than what, and if they do it very quickly, you can, the success of that is going to make them want to do more and more. But presume competence. Do not think that they are incapable of doing things. So these are a few pictures of actually the baking industry seems to be taking a lot of people with autism. So these are a few pictures of some active cafes that are there. This one is Mom's Bakes and Cakes in Hyderabad, which is run by Roshan, who is a boy with autism, and his mother. This is Cafe I Will Fly in Kolkata, which again has a lot of people with developmental disabilities, including autism. This is Sai Bakery, again mostly has autism in Chennai, and Cafe Arpan, that I'm sure many of us know about, in Mumbai. So all these places have started these small eateries, small businesses for people with autism and other developmental disabilities to be able to be useful contributing members in society. And the reviews from these places are as far as any other cafe. It is not that people take pity on them and go back, but it is because the food is so good, it is very well cleaned. Because again, people with autism, once they're given a task, they will definitely do it very well, if provided it is their area of interest. Another actively recruiting area is SAP Labs, and they have an Autism at Work program that has around, I think, 127 people with autism over 9 countries working actively in their data processing and things like that. In India, as far as I know, there is one person, one lady called Asha from Bangalore, who is part of this program. But again, this is an organization that is looking out for people with autism to employ them. Enable India is an NGO that works towards empowering and training differently abled people into the vocational field. So it is not only people with autism, people with visual impairments, hearing impairments, all kinds of things. They are trained. They have a good training program, and then they get them placed, and they sensitize the employers. They give they go with the person through a few weeks of jobs while they are working, and see what are the various challenges and barriers that they face and how they can overcome it. So they are doing a wonderful work. If you look at it, I remember when I attended the conference earlier, a lady from Israel had come and she had said as to how their country, in Israel, being in the military is like a rite of passage. It is when you become an adult. Everyone goes to the military, whether you're a boy, girl. But if you have autism, you are not let to work in the army, work in the military. And that is something that many people with autism felt very bad about. So what they did is they started training people with autism to be able to look at satellite photographs, and because of their extraordinary visuospatial abilities, they were able to quickly identify things, identify whether a shadow is an animal or a landmine or whatever it is, various other things. And they did extraordinarily well. So they would work in this for 2 years and then they will go back to the civilian life. So there are a lot of initiatives, lot of things that are happening worldwide that we need to be aware of and try and replicate them in our country also. Always remember, autism is definitely a spectrum, but every child with autism has hopes, dreams, abilities, feelings, desires, thoughts, and possibilities. And finding them out and encouraging them on their path is what true inclusion is all about. And it is, I like this quote a lot, what we learned from crayons. They have all learned to live together in the same box. But more than that, I would say that even the crayons actually complement each other. The beauty of one color or the beauty of white is not known until and unless it is along with black, and vice versa. So there is a lot of need for inclusion and a lot of scope that we have, and we just have to start working to it from a young age. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Dr. Susan, that was really informative session. So that was really an elaborative session on autism, inclusion, professional and parental perspective. Yes.
Ma'am, I need to ask a question from
Yes,
the Mary
ma'am, go
ma'am.
ahead. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Oh, okay, ma'am. Actually, I want to know the difference between the repetitive and the restricted behavior of the child with autism.
Repetitive patterns are okay. What do you mean by restricted? Restricted is that it's very narrow interests. Okay, so children who have, for example, there are children who are interested only in dinosaurs, children who are interested only in transformers, children who are interested only in vehicles or animals. So that is where you have your restricted interest. So it is specific to a particular thing. It is very narrow. They are not generally interested in other things. So that is what restricted interest means. Now, repetitive is doing the same thing over and over again, which can be repetitive hand movements or repetitive body movements. It can be doing the same sequence over and over again, in the sense that, like, for example, if a child has to go have food, he will get up, he will go around his table 2-3 times and then sit to have food. So these are certain routines that are there. Or anytime the father comes home, the child has to go out. That is, it is a repetitive kind of thing that the child does. Or it can even be repetitive words like echolalia, repeating sentences from movies out of context, from cartoons out of context. So that is where repetitive things come. Now, the difference between both otherwise is that if you look at what repetitive behavior usually is, repetitive behavior is, if it is a physical movement, it is called stimming. That is again a manifestation, or it can, like I said, it can be because they are anxious, or it can be because they're seeking a sensory input. The other repetitive behaviors, like doing the same thing over and over again, inflexibility and all, that comes usually because they are anxious, and because they are they don't like unpredictability. None of us like unpredictability. When there was a lockdown that was proclaimed, I'm sure all of us became really anxious as to what is going to happen. No one has any idea. So that unpredictability is much more magnified in children with autism, because they are not able to read people's behavior, or they have a difficulty in life. It's not they can't read, they have a difficulty in reading people's behavior, the intent behind people's behavior. So they prefer something that is very known and very routine to them. So this is what repetitiveness is all about. When you look at restricted patterns, it is just that is what they are interested in. So and so they have a difficulty widening their interest. So what we do is, how we help them is that people who have like severely restricted interests in animals, they like animals so much that they are not going to learn counting, they are not going to learn spelling, they're not going to learn anything. All they want to do is animals. So we use these animals to teach them counting, the animals to teach them spelling. So the phonetics and all are linked to animals. So we make use of their interests and we try and teach them the other concepts that they need to learn. And this restricted interest is what their area of specialization is going to be. So if a person likes animals a lot, he may become a good veterinarian, or may not necessarily be a veterinarian doctor per se, but is going to go work well with animals. So either as a veterinarian help, or if he's academically good, even a veterinarian doctor. So these are all the way we decide, or way we help them to figure out what to do in the future based on their interests. I hope that is clear.
Yeah, ma'am. Thank you,
clear?
ma'am. Ma'am, like, ma'am, ki they are very much restricted in their eating habits. They like to prefer only some snacks on the basis of the texture, on the basis of the color, smell, or they want to eat the upper layer of the chapati. So by this way, they are very much restricted towards their eating habits. On the other hand, if we are talking about the repetitive behavior, like if someone say ki mama, so they will repeat the word mama mama mama, so it's a equalia, so it means repeating of something is the another thing, and restricted of
Yes.
having interest in some eating habits or in behavior or any other thing. It means they are very much particular towards certain things.
Yes.
I'm
It's a very
fine.
narrow thing that they like.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
So we have our another speaker, Mr. Daniel Chawan. He's from Pune. He works in a BPO as a training manager. So he's a father of 3 children, and his second child is autistic. Mr. Daniel would like to share his experience as a parent, as how he have been gone through, undergone different experiences in his journey himself.
And I'm also really thankful. I'm happy to have Dr. Susan. I got to learn from her a lot, and a big thank you to the audience. I mean, you have been very patient enough to listen, to understand. Uh, I'm really thankful to everyone, find, learning, and as an autistic parent, I think so everything has been covered. What are the challenges we go through? Rather than we focusing on the weakness, let's focus on the strength. So, well, I as a parent, I would just want to tell few things. I won't take much of your time. My daughter, when she was in her 6th month, we took her to a doctor because there was a squint in her eyes, and that's as soon as the early intervention we can call out the early. Then very soon we did the MRI, and we got to know that there is no blood and oxygen in her brain. Okay, so that's a neurological disorder. So, and one thing I really want to appreciate Dr. Susan, she spoke about development, she spoke about teaching techniques. One thing I also don't recommend is medicines. Recommend to some extent. Please, don't phrase my words, or maybe don't take my words as for what I said. But yes, autism parents have their own challenges. There are different type of autism. Autism has no dimension. It doesn't fit into a box, so it's very different for a parent, and it depends from parent to parent, person to person, from a case to case. It's a mild, it's a severe, it's a moderate, and God knows, I mean, the way we deal with the kids. So a message we want to send out a message to the parents, like you are doing a fabulous job, keep doing it. We're not able to take our children outside, but try to work with them, try to play with them, try to do the therapist whichever way you can do at your home, Dr. Susan. And I'm really thankful and very happy that I could be part of this session. I'll tell you, like, I used to give my daughter a lot of medicines like Valparin, Brainwise, Constant Ratio. Then Miraset is something, when she gets seizure attacks. So she still gets the seizure attacks, but and then I got my certificate. Yeah, being a parent, it's really difficult to meet ends. A lot of things are cost effective. I did send my daughter to school, so very high fees charged. But that should not stop a parent. I mean, I'm sure, like, you guys, I am, don't lose hope. Keep up the good job you're doing, and please keep me a part of the next sessions if you have. So I would want to learn every day in my life, and I want to give the best to what my child I can do. I would want to end on the same note what Dr. Susan. Please come up with questions. Dr. Susan is there to answer. And if there's some, so thank you everyone, and thanks for such a lovely time. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Daniel, for sharing.
So, see, I have a daughter. She's like 7 years, and I said like she's autistic. So I am, I am sitting with her, trying to understand. I put a pattern, and I set up a routine. Let's say she's not a toilet trained, but I'm setting up a routine. And for most of the things, I'm setting up a routine. So is that the right way of parenting? I mean, or you would want? I mean, if I like the moment she wakes up, after 5 to 10 minutes, I take her to the washroom and I make her sit, and so that's what I'm doing, to get her into a routine. So is it a right way that you start setting up routines for everything, or is it like you leave up to the child whenever he or she wants to do whatever she wants?
To learn toileting, actually setting up a routine helps, because again, generally first thing in the morning that all of us do is go to the toilet actually. So that is a good routine for her to start, and also for her to understand that the toilet is where I need to pass urine or pass stools. Taking her on a timely time is what is going to help her associate that where I need to pass urine or pass stools is the bathroom. Okay, so that routine is fine. Now, other routines, again, what I generally would say is that in the beginning, yes, it is helpful to have a routine, but the routine itself should be a little bit flexible, because we don't want it to go into a rigid kind of pattern, in the sense that like in the morning she wakes up and for example the first thing that she does is go for a morning walk, and for example if it's raining that day and she can't go for a walk, she shouldn't go into a distress, an anxiety driven distress.
Correct,
Understanding.
correct.
So one good way of doing that is visual schedules is something that really helps. So you have a set of things that she needs to do during the day. Using pictures, you alternate the order, keep changing the order a little bit, so that again she knows in the beginning of the day, first thing that she sees, she knows what all is planned for the day, but the order is not completely very rigid and time bound. I understand it. Now when children start going to school, actually there is a routine to the day, because they have to get up at this time, they have to go to school, the school bus comes at this time, or they are driven to school at that time, they come back from school at this time. So there is a routine that is already there, and then you can work on having certain routines, in the sense like for example extracurricular activities, maybe Monday and Wednesday she goes swimming, or Tuesday and Friday she goes, so that kind of a routine is okay. But right now when the children are full time at home, planning every single second of the day in a particular way is going to make them a little bit more rigid. So I would suggest that you plan what all activities you want to do, but shuffle it maybe every alternate day or so, so that she knows, okay, I have to look at the schedule, this is what I am supposed to do, and this is the order that the things are going to be. But it is not like in the morning, if it is raining and she can't go for a morning walk, she throws a tantrum. Not a tantrum, she has a meltdown because it has changed her schedule. Have I made that clear? Is my doubt, is your doubt answered?
Yes. I mean, yes. I mean, yeah. So not all things can be under routine. Yes, like you said, if it doesn't meet, then they turn into meltdowns, and then it's very difficult to handle.
Yeah.
But
so
yeah, I
introducing
mean,
a little bit of
to
flexibility helps that way.
Yes, yeah, it goes to all parents also. Like in the initial days, we were really struggling to have a get toilet trained. But yeah, I mean it's showing with the time. But yes, again, we have to keep working. So thanks, Dr. Susan.
We have another question from Mr. Mallikarjuna. It's in the chat box now. How to improve speech for a child with autism?
So the focus again, like I've said in the beginning, is not speech. Okay, it is communication. You work on communication, and in addition to which you do speech therapy, the oromotor training and things like that and all, and speech may come. But the focus should be communication. The problem is that many children with autism also have a coexisting condition called apraxia. So what apraxia is, I'm trying to make it very simple. So when I speak, for example, my lips have to move, my tongue has to move, my palate has to move, I have to regulate my breath. I can't speak while I'm breathing in, because voice sound has to come out in an exhale when I'm speaking. So there is a lot of coordination of various muscles, various things that have to happen in a particular order for the particular speech to come. I understand it. So some children who have difficulty with this, in the sense that with the coordination in getting speech out, that is what is called apraxia. Okay. So if your child has apraxia and you're going to focus only on speech and not communication, what is going to happen is that the child is going to try his or her level best to speak, is not able to speak, doesn't have another mode of communication. It's going to manifest as behavior, where they end up throwing tantrums, they end up self-injuring themselves, being aggressive towards others, simply because they are not able to communicate. Now, there is another very common misconception that if you start off with a AAC, like either picture exchange system, or with using devices like Avaz or Jello or some other apps like that, that children will never speak. That is not true, actually. What we realize, what studies have shown and what we've realized over the years is that once children have understood that communication helps them, then they make an attempt to communicate more. And in addition to which, if you're giving them the required speech therapy, they are going to start speaking faster than if they weren't assisted by using an alternative method of communication. So focus on communication. That is where your focus should be, and give speech therapy. There are various speech therapy techniques that are used. There are various principles that are used. You use the applied behavior analysis principles called verbal behavior analysis for speech. You use for children with apraxia, there is something that is called prompt techniques that are used. There are various again teach principles where you use visuals to help a child speak. So there are various different techniques that you can use to help to get a child speak. But again, like I said, the focus, if it is not communication, will end up in a frustrated child. So that is where you have to start off with communication. I hope that made things clearer. Again, yes, I'm not saying that your child is never going to speak. Like I said, unfortunately, for around 40 to 50% people with autism do not speak because they have this coexisting apraxia. That is why I gave the example of an excellent poetess, but she cannot speak a word because of her apraxia. That ability in her would have been completely missed if the parents had only been concentrating on speech. Again, we have in UC, in Berkeley College in America, there is an autism advocate called Hari Krishna. Hari is what he's called. He is a non-verbal person with autism who is not only studying in university, but is also taking the autism class there. And he types and the device reads out for him. And so he is very well become a part of a productive member of society. But even though he is not speaking. So yes, communication is key.
Yes, I'm continuing my question. Like earlier, I said like there is a sensory issues which has
sensory issues coming up.
Yeah, it's coming. It wasn't there. It's coming up from last 1 month, and like I try to work on all the kinds of issues which she is having with the legs, hands. Now that has been clear, but there is new things are coming up now. You know, he is continuously rubbing and his gums. And continuously he want a continuous touch to his lips. So for that I'm using a kind of a cloths and rubbing him, but still, you know, like if I saw something, there is something else is coming up. So I mean, right now, to be very focused on my question, for this rubbing to the lips, like what it is, and is it a speech issue or is it a OT issue? What exactly?
See, all that you have said, his hand, his feet, his lips, all this are actually sensations of touch, right? So it is his tactile system. That is what we call the sensation of touch. It's a tactile system that has a little bit of either a defensiveness or a seeking behavior. So defensiveness is where he doesn't like particular textures or particular things, whereas seeking behavior is what he's doing right now, rubbing on his lips and all. So it is definitely a touch input related sensory issue, especially if he wants to keep rubbing his lips. Even some children keep biting things because again, the oral mucosa, that is the inner lining of your mouth, is very sensitive to various kinds of touch. So when they feel that they're not getting enough sensation, they keep biting things, they keep pressing onto things, or they keep hitting their lips trying to get the sensation. So it is that same system. I know it is different manifestations of it, but it is the same system that is making a problem, in the sense that it is affecting him. So what we generally suggest and what works for children with autism is that they need to be on something that is called a sensory diet. So what a sensory diet is, that depending on what all the sensory systems that your child seems to be struggling with, they get a regular routine activities that kind of help stimulate and if it is stimulation that is needed, stimulation, or if it is desensitization that is needed, desensitization. So for example, like your child, what I would suggest is, since he is keeping on rubbing his lips and doing a lot of the chewing movements and things like that, one thing what can be useful is using a vibrating toothbrush, because that kind of gives the additional kind of a sensory input that he needs, so that he stops rubbing his lips full time. Now, this is going to be you kind of do it for when you're trying to desensitize him or rather get out of that behavior. You will do it little frequently till the behavior kind of stops, but then you continue it in the sense that his brushing, instead of with a regular brush, may end up being with a vibrating toothbrush for the rest of his life, which is okay. So there are some children who need an additional vestibular stimulus, which is in the sense that they are always jumping, they always want to be on the move. So such children, we try and get them into sports, because once they are into the sports and once they get that into a routine, that sensory need of theirs is met. Similarly, another child who always keeps flapping hands, or who keeps like putting his hands in weird postures and keep flapping them, a suggestion that I give them is to try teaching them mridangam or drums of some sort, where they get that feedback that they need, they have the flapping movements that they need, then it can be incorporated into their lifestyle. So what we need to do is, rather than looking at this as problems that need to be like a wound that needs to be covered with a band-aid and temporary solution, no. Child needs a steady sensory diet, like how we all have a diet, or how we all eat food. We all know that junk food is not good for us, and healthy food is what is needed. So that diet should be a part of his routine that is going to get carried on even when he becomes a school-going kid, a college-going boy, an adult. So it does help in the desensitization, because you should remember that, again, like I said earlier, autism is a problem with the connectivity in the brain. So the connectivity is a problem that is going to persist. We do try through OT, we do bring about changes in it, but it is going to be a thing that is going to last. So by incorporating it into his routine is what is going to help long term. I hope that has helped you, Paravi.
Yes, ma'am, very helpful, because whatever you mentioned, like, these are all the symptoms my son is having, like whether it's a fluffing hands or with the sensory issues or with the repetitiveness, all the issues he is holding, but it is not, it's very like, unmanageable. Everything is manageable. He's in a position of manageable. So definitely I'll work on it. Ma'am, is it a OT people, do they cover sensory issues as well?
Yes, OT does. OT is the one that does the sensory integration.
Really. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Susan, ma'am, for an elaborative session on autism inclusion. And thank you for your patience in answering all the questions and clearing the doubts. That was really wonderful. And and I thank Mr. Daniel for sharing his experience as a parent. So on behalf of Fun Learning, I thank you all the participants here with us today, and make this webinar a successful one.